Welcome back. We often talk about the upcoming midterm elections, and it can be problematic for the Republicans, but what about the Democrats? They may be united in their opposition to President Trump, but there are huge divisions amongst Democrats dating back to the 2016 campaign, and nobody knows that more than our next guest, Tim Canova, who primaried Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who at the time was the chair of the Democratic National Committee. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Alan.
Now, by trade, you are a college professor at Nova Southeastern, correct?
Actually, a law professor, yes.
Okay. And everybody was watching your race in 2016 because it's not every day that one primaries a sitting congresswoman, but not only that, she was the chairperson of the Democratic National Committee. That was a tough race for you.
It was. It was an exciting race. I was a candidate for less than 8 months against the sitting chair of the Democratic National Committee. And at the beginning of the race, of course, I had no name recognition whatsoever. And in the final 2 months, we really closed very quickly near the end. The official result was that we fell short by about a shift of 3,000 votes would have changed the election result. And a couple of months after the election, we put in a public records request to inspect the ballots. We were going to inspect the ballots in about a dozen precincts. A number of folks had concerns that the official tally might have been off. And it was a real education for me because we were forced to sue to see those ballots. The supervisor of elections stonewalled our request and we sued. We sued last June, and while the suit was pending, the supervisor of elections destroyed all of our paper ballots in violation of federal law.
But when you did run, you did you raised a lot of money, and a lot of that was in a similar fashion to Bernie Sanders. You had a lot of support from Bernie Sanders and from those who support him, and that kind of basically frames the divisions in the Democratic Party between establishment Democrats and, is it establishment versus Democrats, progressives, or could there progressives be part of the establishment?
Well, I do think there's a progressive establishment that has grown up in the past couple of years. So it's unclear exactly where the lines are drawn. But I do agree that a big part of what separates our campaign and a lot of grassroots campaigns from an incumbent like Wasserman Schultz is how we raise money. And folks could go online to opensecrets.org. They keep track of all congressional campaigns. And you'll see that Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been taking millions of dollars from the biggest Wall Street banks and private prison companies and a whole bunch of interests that make it very difficult to represent your constituents.
So now you are running again, but this time you have left the Democratic Party and you are running as an independent.
Yes. Well, I was trying to get the party to join me in calling for an investigation of what happened to the paper ballots in our race. You know, when folks start losing faith and confidence that their ballots are even being counted, there's a real problem in our democracy. And there was just nothing but silence from party officials. And it seems, well, why should I run in a closed Democratic primary where they really rig everything against a challenger to an incumbent? The incumbent gets showered with corporate money and doesn't really have to debate. They're fine with Wasserman Schultz dodging debates. So by running as an independent, it opens up the field. There's so many people now. I think nationwide, 45% of voters are now non-party affiliation. They're bigger than either the Democratic or Republican Party.
Right. There is a lot of energy inside the Democratic Party during these midterms, and there's a lot of predictions about whether or not the Democrats can take over the House in the very least. But do you believe there is the energy to basically vote out an incumbent Democrat who is well known like Debbie Wasserman Schultz?
Well, I think we almost did it last time, and I do think folks want change, and many people are tired of these incumbents. The approval rating of Congress is in single digits now, and yet members of Congress get reelected at 95% reelection rates. So what is wrong with our system? It means we take a look at the districts, they're gerrymandered, so they favor one party over another, and then they have closed Democratic and closed Republican primaries in the state. So it locks most voters out of the system. And these are taxpayer-financed primaries as well. So it seems very unfair to most people that this is the way things are done in our state.
Let me ask you this. We have a minute left in this segment, but is there a problem right now within the Democratic Party amongst both sides of it that there are litmus tests that the Bernie people believe that if somebody's been working in Democratic politics for a long time, that they they're part of the establishment and they would never get the support of supporters and vice versa?
I think for the progressive side, the litmus tests are usually geared towards how do you raise your money and where do you stand on specific issues. Are you for Medicare for all? Are you for jobs programs for average folks, for working people and low-income folks? Those are the litmus tests that I think it's good that we have those tests. For the establishment, they have their own litmus tests. They don't want to speak to you unless you've raised a few $100,000, unless you're what they consider to be viable.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Tim Canova right after this. Welcome back. We are continuing our conversation with congressional candidate Tim Canova, who is running in the district that is Broward County. And we're talking to you because you may be well known in Democratic circles here in Florida because you primaried Debbie Wasserman Schultz in 2016, and you are running against her again, but this time as an independent. How did you come to that decision to leave the Democratic Party and not run as a Democrat?
Well, I first registered as a Democrat when I turned 18, when I first registered to vote. And out of college, I took a job on Capitol Hill as a legislative aide for the late U.S. Senator Paul Tsongas, a Democrat. So I've been a Democrat most of my life, and this was a very tough decision to come to. But it was very clear that the closed primary at the end of August is a very fixed in many ways. It's very much rigged to get the incumbents back in. It makes it very difficult for challengers like me. And at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, the party just didn't want to investigate the destruction of paper ballots. So that silence was deafening. And at the same time, you take a look at this younger generation, the Parkland students who are stepping up, for instance, millennials, Gen Xers, and younger, they're anything but silent all of a sudden, and most of them are non-party affiliation. So I think this is a great opportunity to broaden and deepen our democracy.
But let me ask you this. If you're talking about the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party and those who have been involved in Democratic politics for years, do they agree on the vast majority of the issues that are out there, and therefore isn't the energy best spent, if you're on the Democratic side, to defeating Republicans this fall?
Well, I think Democrats should try to be defeating Republicans, but look at their strategy for the past decade. The Democratic Party has been trying to marginalize the progressive base of its party for a decade, and the results have been a disaster for the Democratic Party. When you take a look at the Democratic strength or lack of strength in the U.S. House of Representatives, the Senate, state legislatures, and governorships, it is the weakest position the Democratic Party has been in 98 years, since 1920. So it's clearly not working. You know, the past 10 years since the financial collapse of 2008 has been very good for elite interests. Wall Street has done very well. The Federal Reserve gave trillions of dollars of support to the big banks. The stock market rebounded. But I think for most Americans, this has been a Great Depression in jobs and income and savings.
So let me ask you this question, broadening out just from the Broward congressional district that you're running in, but looking around the entire state, including this area here. This area, I can't recall the last time a Democrat was elected in this congressional district, although it's been redistricted. This year, you know, the national pundits are saying it is less Republican than it might be, that Vera Buchanan, the incumbent, may be in real danger. But there are a lot of skeptics out there. Given the energy of Democrats and progressives, do you think that the Democrats have a real shot in winning this district?
I do. And there are a number of districts in South Florida that have been held by Republican members of Congress, members of the House, even though those districts have been voting Democrat in presidential election years. They are ripe for the taking. I've been working hard to try to support progressive candidates in some of these districts. And even though I'm an independent right now, I will probably be supporting a number of Democrats who are fighting it out for the fall. We want to see progressives that are elected across the board. I think for most Americans now and most Floridians, they don't even look at things as Democrat versus Republican right now as much as insider versus outsider and corruption versus integrity.
But what would you say to people who say the problem with both parties is that the Republicans have gone too far to the right and the Democrats have gone too far to the left, and the people who are in the middle really feel that they are underrepresented?
Well, I hear that a lot, and I'm not sure I agree with it very much. You take a look at actual issues, such as Medicare for all, the idea of a universal coverage for health insurance. Supermajorities of Democrats and of independents support it, and even a majority of Republican voters support it now. And yet both party establishments have not been able to go that way and get it done. It seems to me that both party establishments, it's not left versus right, they're mostly swimming in special interest money, big industries, big corporations, whereas the people of this country want real solutions that are going to help us, not just with health care, but the rising costs of education, the deterioration of our K-12 public schools, the lousy job market, stagnant incomes. All those things are not being addressed because both of the mainstream establishments of the political parties have no interest in helping the folks. They're really pandering to their base of supporters, their donors, their corporate donor class.
All right, Tim Canova, thanks for joining us, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. We want to thank Tim Canova, who is running for Congress, for joining us this evening. And when we return, we'll have a final look at your First Alert weather, plus our primetime headlines, so stay with us.